It's the Redbird Reboot Podcast. Are you ready to get rebooted, Cardinals fans? He settles down, at least in the zone, and does not stop running.
Blake Murphy.
This is the identity for the Arizona Cardinals.
The run defense is just horrendous, and it's been horrendous for the Cardinals for a long time.
And Marcos Labrada.
He's going to bring over his philosophy. It should make it better.
Present the hottest NFL podcast from the country's hottest state.
He should be turning around the logo.
Actually, some breaking news we can cover here. This popped up just about, 6 minutes ago.
It's Redbird Reboot.
All right, how's it going, Arizona Cardinals fans? Today I have a special guest. Many of you people know him as Aaron Van Buren, AVB Sports. He used to be a co-writer or a writer for AZ Sports Underground. Of course, he was always jumping on those consistent live streams with our friend Joe Camo and then Kyler Bird as well. You may remember him from being consistently on those podcasts and also being an expert when it comes to offensive line play, being that you were an ex-offensive lineman. So go ahead and give yourself a quick introduction. Of course, like many people already probably know you, but just so the people that don't know you get to know you.
Yeah. Marcos, thanks for having me on. It's always a joy to do these, especially with the topic of old line play. Been a Cardinals fan for now 21 years. Grew up in the Midwest, grew up in Wisconsin. Eventually, I've seen all their games. I've traveled all over, seen them on the road, home, whatever. I wrote for Raising Zona before basically the site got shut down. That's a whole nother discussion for another day. Taking my knowledge from having played in one of the best conferences, if not the best conference in terms of high school in Wisconsin, and then also got to play some D3 ball on the offensive line, and just been passionate about learning and staying up with the techniques and all the offensive line play throughout the league. So I am nowhere near insert most famous offensive lineman you can think of in terms of knowledge, but it is an honor to be consulted for the position of my favorite team like this. So that's a wrap about me. And now I'm starting to get back into videos, a little bit on my own YouTube channel. Working on being a little more consistent, but I got a lot of stuff going on in personal life. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, well, that's a great thing about being a Cardinals fan and also being a person that loves to follow the team, loves to be able to on a week by week basis get a little bit of for instance, a review on it to be able to see where the state of this Cardinals team is. It's very interesting. I actually have been wanting to ask you this question since you are from the Midwest. What made you a Cardinals fan, and what was it that brought you into becoming part of this Cardinals fandom?
So I this is a question I get all the time from people up here. But when I was, when I first started playing football, my first ever flag football team, ironically in 1998, was the Cardinals. And I remember that a couple years later when I was playing Madden 04, and I was just like, yeah, let's try this out. Let's go play as the Cardinals. And I don't know who I played, but I probably won 50-7 or something like that. Found out about Bolden and Fitzgerald, and a couple months later, I had my first ever jersey, which was an Anquan Bolden one, and 21 years later, here I am. So it was definitely, the roller coaster from basically 2004 to where we are now. I mean, there's been, obviously, we wish there was some consistency of winning, but it's been a roller coaster up and down, and just stayed the course as a Cardinals fan. And somehow my younger brother, who also obviously grew up in the same house as me, became a Seahawks fan. So twice a year for a long time, we were pretty much ready to, get angry at each other. But now we're just kind of mellowed out, and it's just like, no, you're going to lose this game, or you're going to win this game. Like, no, you are. Just it's gotten past the contention point. So,
well, that's what's funny because with the Seahawks and the Cardinals rivalry, we had this weird thing going on where we would win in their stadium. So the Cardinals would win out in Seattle, and then the Seahawks would come into our stadium, and they would beat us regardless of the state. There's times where we were the favorites and we lost to them. There's times where they were the favorites and we beat them and stuff. It's weird. One of the games that always sticks out to me in this rivalry was when we went to Seattle, and it was the game where I forgot who the backup quarterback's name is. This always happens to me. Whenever I want to think about somebody, I'm like, oh, there we go. It just blinks out. But the guy that does the dance on the sideline after you saw, I believe it was Andre Ellington.
That was 2015. Carson Palmer handed it off to Andre Ellington, and Drew Stanton did the high step and single leg kick on the sideline.
Yeah, it was always entertaining because you heard the announcer also have a little bit of a kick with it. He was laughing at his dance, but it was one of those really good dominant like wins that we had over to where we had to travel and then beat them and whatnot. Obviously, we had that Bruce Arians head coached team. We had Carson Palmer. We had Larry Fitzgerald. We had I think we had a couple years, I would say, of I forgot who the wide receiver was who got the DUI and they got kicked out and went over to the New England Patriots.
Michael Floyd,
yeah. Michael Floyd had good productive years for us. But that team, like, I would say that was one of the few times where the Cardinals not only seemed to be a very good dominant team because they were both doing it on both ends. They were doing it on the offensive end, they were doing it on the defensive end. And that was a very strong, man-heavy team where they just, once again, took away the yardage. They were playing up on the line of scrimmage, not really doing too much with zone, but we had the personnel to be able to pull off the man coverage schemes. And it was just a dominant play. And then after that, I think I gave it like one more year with 2016. And then the pieces started falling apart after that. And we just kind of been in a position where our defense has not returned to being that man heavy coverage scheme and been more zone type of scheme, regardless of whether we had a good year or a bad year defensive wise. That's the route that we're going. And we're one of the, I think we're fifth when it comes to defensive backs, being in zone coverage and instead of man coverage. I believe we're like 24th or whatnot. And I saw a video today about like the Detroit Lions insane numbers when it comes to man coverage. They do not like being in zone coverage. So anyways, enough about the defense and whatnot. So my question to you is, what did you think about the offensive line and what did you think about where you thought they were going to be and what they did?
When I set up to do my notes for that question in particular, it really made me think, because when you think about it, there wasn't really anybody who truly stood out throughout the entire duration of the season. Now, I say that with a little bit of a caveat, because I think, and I feel very strongly when I think this, that when we lost Will Hernandez on the road week 5 against San Francisco, I really think that's when the offensive line started to really become like a waterbed. Everything was changing, even though technically on paper, like, there was a winning streak after that. Everyone knows how the season ended. But I really think that Will Hernandez was the key to this offensive line, because when him and Kelvin Beachum were, setting things up against the run early on in the season, like, they were manhandling teams. And late in the year, I mean, of course, they had some good rushing performances, but late in the year when you need that, it wasn't there. It also, like, the veteran leadership, on the line, like, there's stuff that goes on pre-snap, from communication from the center to the quarterback and even the running backs, based on how they're, calling the pass protection. If you have somebody who is as seasoned as Will Hernandez, as opposed to a Tristan Colon or Christian Adams, or, insert whoever out of the 14 or 15 offensive linemen that we played this year, it could be the difference in some of these games. Like, maybe if Will Hernandez is there playing in Carolina, we pick up an extra block that ends up getting us down and we get another field goal. We don't go to overtime. We win the game. Who knows what happens after that? So I think that to sum up this question, the offensive line overperformed, especially for a lot of these guys who some people weren't as excited to see. Kelvin Beachum has had mixed reviews up and down. Jonah Williams getting hurt in the first game and then coming back and then doing okay, but then also being controversial in his play with missing assignments or penalties or whatever. I think everyone overperformed, but I think the Cardinals would be remiss if they did not address the position within the first 3 rounds. I know last year Joe or TCR was talking about, like, you don't need to get, a top dollar first round draft pick in an offensive lineman. Like, there are studs all down the draft, which I understand that and I can see that. But with the critical position that this team is in, you cannot afford to take technically a day 2 offensive lineman that's round 3 versus a day 1. I think Pierce Johnson was hot in his play in the first half of the season, and then I don't know what happened to him in the second half, but there needs to be another interior guy because everyone's always getting older that can be another person to grow and develop. And if you can even have like a swing guard, kind of like going back, and we're talking like 10 years ago with that offensive line 2015 team, like Ted Larson would play left and right guard, if I'm not mistaken. If you have somebody who can plug in the gaps and can do both, as long as it's the same position, I think it'd be a great addition for the line. So overperformed, but still need to improve.
You would I would assume that with that you would say that the offensive line coach probably is somebody that we should have as a keeper. I was a fan of the last offensive line coach that we had, and I'm not sure what happened with him. The only reason why I was such a fan of him is because I just remember the Cardinals always having bad offensive line play, or at the very least not having like top tier play, with the exception of the 2015 season. And it just didn't really seem like the Cardinals were ever in a position to ever draft like a tackle that was going to be an all pro or Pro Bowl type of player. I mean, we had Brown that we drafted ahead of Adrian Peterson, and it kind of like that to me, honestly, that kind of unfortunately and unfairly set my expectations to say we don't need to draft an offensive lineman in the first round, or we don't need to at least draft them high. We need to, draft a lot of them, and we need to scatter the picks everywhere between day 1 and day 2 or day 3. But I wouldn't want to go day 3, but I think the fall off happens after day 2. And to me, it kind of stung me. And then we did it again with Jonathan Cooper, where we drafted him and he was a guard, and we drafted him in top 10. And then unfortunately the circumstance happened where he broke his leg. He never got going. And to me, that unfairly made it so that I would always get kind of iffy about drafting an offensive line in the first round. Now, I maintain that, like, I didn't think we should have drafted Paris Johnson last year, but I cannot argue with how good this guy has ascended. He's changing my mind when it comes to like drafting somebody that high and then seeing him develop, because he does have the tools. He's a big statured guy, does not look like the prototypical like offensive lineman that you would think, just a bigger version of a strong athletic person or dude that like is very mobile, very athletic. And he's showing me that at the position, those type of offensive linemen, the ones that are very athletic, the ones that are just very like not cut, but like just bigger versions of a
mobile
dude that's like, yeah, exactly, just mobile, not like somebody that's just like straight down like Aaron Hernandez. I was gonna say, I'm sorry for that one, Aaron Hernandez, Will Hernandez, who looks like a fridge because he looks the same from his shoulders coming down, where is Paris Johnson is more like a V. He has that V form and shape, but he's an offensive lineman, so he turned me to that. And like I said, what's your thoughts about the offensive line coach, and what do you think about him?
Well, I think our offensive line coach, Clayton Adams, he's phenomenal. To be able to get out of, for him to get what he got out of this offensive line is great. The former offensive line coach you were looking for was Sean Kugler, who was the fall guy for the whole Steve Keim in Mexico sexual assault allegations thing, which we still haven't found out whatever truly happened with that. But to be honest, I haven't this first year was the first year I ever heard of Coach Adams here, but he's done a fine job, and I think, like I said before, with the way this team is set up, with such a crucial season, because it took 6 years, but now we're finally getting the hard questions about Kyler Murray, which a small sect, or you could say large sect of this fan base, and those not in this fan base have been asking of Kyler Murray for years. So what's the best way to really see if he's that guy? Give him protection. Give him an offensive line that can, create a better run game than what we even had this year. When it comes to run blocking this year, according to Pro Football Network, the Cardinals were 9th or in the top 10 of creating rushing yards before contact, which is a full yard, is what they got. And they were also 11th in run blocking win rate. If you add another guard or somebody else who knows how to move, or another depth piece in case someone does get hurt, the sky's the limit with James Conner. Get an offensive line that creates more holes for the passing game, and then you have to work from the trenches out. And I may take some heat for this, but I've said it before. The only reason why Dak Prescott has evolved into the passer that he is because he was gifted the Great Wall of Dallas 2.0. Travis Frederick, Tyron Smith before he started getting hurt all the dang time. Go back and look at that offensive line that Dak Prescott had for quite some time. It performed. It gave the running game a chance to improve. It let Dak have time, and it helped his development. The Arizona Cardinals haven't really helped Kyler Murray on the offensive line until they got Paris Johnson, and even then, that's debatable. So if you can make it so cut and dry that you can see the decisions being made for you based off the film and everything else that goes on, I don't know why you wouldn't try to invest in a first or second round offensive lineman. But the mobility, from what you were saying earlier about Paris Johnson, is what's needed, because all the defensive ends in the league now are, they're freaking aliens, man. They're like 6'6", 6'7". Their wingspans are literally huge. So you have to be able to set out at an angle so flat but so fast, and be able to come up and redirect in case they come inside. And then it gets into hand placement, hand combat, and all this other stuff that you need those mobile guys. And the Cardinals offense, from what I saw last year, and unfortunately I don't think there was anywhere online you can really see if there's a breakdown of zone versus counter versus power read or whatever. I felt like it was a heavy zone team, or zone, and then followed up by like your average power counter scheme. But they executed it well, and they were able to get guys into the second level. More mobile guys like Paris Johnson, on the perimeter would be great. Kelvin Beachum is, I don't know what, 12, 13 years in the league at this point. You're going to need a replacement for him. Jackson Barton didn't do too bad because he nullified, I think it was the Rams pass rush, but then he got hurt. So it's a place for investment, and then you got to have a mauler on the inside. And you look at the offensive lines that are really good around the league, it's kind of your beef is in the middle, and your perimeter guys are, kind of like the skill offensive linemen. So I'm not sure if that really answers what you were asking for.
I do know that because of the fact that for us the offensive line overachieved than what we expected, and I can say that on a day by day basis that was the case, where it's week by week, we didn't know if we were going to get a great performance or if we were going to get a kind of like a bad performance. I would say the
Right.
last game of the season, they didn't really have a good performance. I think that just goes more so towards injuries and whatnot. You didn't have the same line that you started with, and the Cardinals have been unfortunately plagued with that problem on a year by year basis, where the offensive line that we have to start with isn't the same offensive line. And I agree with you with Will Hernandez. I think Will Hernandez, being that like that rock, that great pass protector, and he was getting even better when it came to like a run blocking, which was not his strength. Well, I mean, he's a fridge. Basically, he's just more so like a stump where you're not going to be able to run him over. But when you're asking him to do stuff like a pull on certain like run schemes and whatnot, like it was going to be hard for him. And he overachieved when it came to that. And I'm a big Will Hernandez fan, mostly because of the fact that like I do have like a little bit of a connection with the Hispanic, with the Hispanic community, and he's one of the main people that we have up there and whatnot.
Right.
But there's going to be the question mark about whether or not they should resign him. I think they should, obviously.
Oh, he's a
I
must.
think yeah, and I don't know what kind of market he would have out there, but I think he would want to stay because I think he does like being in this area with the Arizona Cardinals and whatnot.
Yeah.
We've embraced him. He went over with the New York Giants, just didn't really ever take off. And when we signed him, me along with I believe it was, I forgot the other sports writer that was pulling for him. He's one of the co-hosts of the Rise Up Red Sea podcast. Like I said, this always happens to me. I always forget names and whatnot. But he was also pulling for him heavily, so I have to give him credit if I ever remember his name. And once we kept him here, we had him from the Cliff Kingsbury scheme. Now with Drew Petzing scheme, which I know me and you both know he's and polarizing when it comes to the community. There's people that like him, there's people that don't.
Yep.
And when it comes to like the future, I mean, we'll see with that. But now he's taking on an entirely different scheme, and I think he's just kind of flourished. So I really, really hope that we go ahead and keep him. I have a question about when it comes to measurements. So I'll just go ahead and put this on the screen. I have BJ Ojulari on, I guess on standby, you could say, but not really. I wish we could talk to him. But so to me, arm length has always been a thing when it came to like edge rushers. There's some edge rushers that obviously have tiny arms, like T-Rex arms and whatnot. And I think Nick Bosa and the Bosa brothers fall into that category where their arms aren't long enough to become a dominant pass rusher. But, when it comes to the talent itself, it speaks for itself. They're just like Nick Bosa's a year-to-year all-pro guy. And, of course, if Joey can stay healthy, he would have a better career. Arm length is something that has always come up. So BJ Ojulari being 6'2", 34 and a quarter-inch arms, I believe that's up there when it comes to percentile. 33 is the average. 32 means you're in like T-Rex zone and whatnot. So when it comes to that, with the tackles, so the arm length, what is so special about that? And when it comes to facing off on a tackle, do you want a tackle that has longer arms, or is it something that could just be like, passed over with just pure talent?
That's a really good question. I think probably what everyone would want you to say, and from my own perspective, they would be like, "Oh yeah, of course you want to have the longest arms because that way you can get hands on the defender before at this yardage point in relation to the quarterback as opposed to the rather." I see it as a double-edged sword because if you have super long arms, um, you have to be really diligent in your hand placement. I know there's all different sorts of techniques like flashing your hands in order to get the defensive lineman's arms to come up, and then you can swat and then fit back inside. Or even if he's trying to go outside, you find hand on the hip and you just ride out. Make sure you don't grab the back of the jersey. I would say you probably, if you have long arms, your hand combat better be on fire. Like you should be doing like martial arts or something like that. I know when I was a strength coach at one of the colleges I was at, we would literally do hand fighting with the offensive linemen in the weight room. We would put out the arm, and then it'd just be like a club dip rip or a bunch of other different patterns. And once you got the pattern down, then it was just, okay, now you're going to do this 8, 9, 10, 12 times in a row, super fast, and just trying to simulate something while keeping the brains wired in the off season. I would say, going back, you probably want to be in the middle, good, decent enough length, but not too long or too short. So that way you can really be able to fit back inside if you are playing against a guy, with somebody's arms that long. And then it also all comes down to strength. And how well can you extend. And a lot of people want to talk about how strong your chest is, and on bench press, which is of course a pivotal part of being an offensive lineman. But one part that's always overlooked is how strong are your triceps, because your triceps are the ones that actually extend your elbows. And when you think about setting out on a pass block, that's that main action going on here. Of course, the chest is involved too, but your triceps have to be just as strong, if not stronger than your pecs. So it really gets down into like training, and then all the sets and reps in terms of stuff like that, which is what I went to school for, but I'll say that for a different day. It is something that can be overcome with skill and practice, and if you have somebody who can teach you really good hand moves, you're set. Otherwise, that defensive lineman is going to get hands on you, and then if he's hands inside and you can't come from the outside or top down, get him out, then you've already lost. So it's the most important thing. If you make them, if you can get them to show hands and get them away, and even buying just really 0.2 of a second added on to a quarterback's time in the pocket can make all the difference in the throw.
Yeah, that is true. I believe I saw a sports science. I don't know if you ever watched Sports Science. Remember that old show? And so there was one that was talking about what the difference is between just giving a defensive end or a edge rusher like a small nudge, and what difference it makes. Of course, that episode, I believe, it had Ben Roethlisberger as the quarterback. He was dropping back, and they had an offensive lineman basically just stand pat, let the guy run right by you. And it's kind of funny because he got hit in the face and by Ben Roethlisberger, who released the ball, elbowed him in the face, and he started bleeding. But when they measured just an offensive lineman extending his arm out, getting a little bit of a nudge on the edge rusher, it gave him just that little bit of time to be able to release that ball and release it clean and whatnot. Because obviously you want to give your quarterback some time to be able to look down the field, find his either if he's decisive or not, go through his progressions, and if he already knows where he's going to attack, he's going to attack. But the whole point is you want to give him time. That's obviously what the offensive line is there for. So something I was always curious about when it comes to arm length, because I've heard, when it comes to like some edge rushers, and they talk about like their arm length being subpar. They talk about this guy basically has T-Rex arm, so it's going to be hard for him to make it in the league. And if you are going to make it in the league as a short arm defensive end or edge rusher, you better be somebody like Nick Bosa, who's going to be able to win with power. And power being, I think that's, there was a offensive line teaching segment. I think it was ran by the Eagles right tackle, Lane Johnson. Yep. And he had mentioned that like power is one of the things that you face out there in the NFL for the most part. So if you're gonna be a successful offensive lineman, you better be able to defend against power, which is what you're gonna face the majority of the time. And it makes sense with a lot of defensive ends coming from the bottom up, being on 4-point stance instead of a 2-point stance. And that's a question I've been wanting to ask you as well. So with Bruce Arians and Todd Bowles implementing that 3-4 defense, you can ask, like Blake Murphy can tell you guys like how many times I mentioned this. I love coming from the bottom up, so I am more of a 4-point stance person. but we've been implementing our edge rushers in a 2-point stance because we run more of a 3-4 scheme instead of a 4-3. Does the leverage make a difference when it comes to coming from the bottom up, or is it just something that's like not really that big of a deal?
So I think what's really important before we get into that is, I mean, obviously you have your 2-point, which is, just your feet, no hand in the ground. Your 3-point is your most traditional that you'll see across, 90% of the plays. And then your 4-point stance is usually reserved for those short yardage, goal line, punt block, stuff of the similar.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Like that. When it comes to like guys being in a 4-point, it usually means they're crashing. They could be going to inside, or they're really going to try to come diagonally across one each way of the gaps. And like if you're, especially in a pass play, and they are running, let's say it is a 3-4, so it's an odd stack front. So it means the linebackers are standing directly over or behind the defensive lineman. When one of the rules you're always taught in offensive line play is if you see a guy going away, there's someone else coming to fill that gap. And depending upon, in terms of pass coverage, like are you in a man blocking scheme where it's just straight on, or does the defensive line fall into like a zone kind of scheme where it can be called either way to the strength? Because if it gets called to the strength where there's more defensive players, the side that it's called to is going to have the center for help. So if I'm a left guard and I got a 3-tech on my left shoulder, and we call this, pass blocking strength to the left, a lot of people use L&R names. So let's call it, let's just say legal to the left. So that means I slide to the left. If I have that 3 technique come to my inside and go to my right, I know I can let him go because the center is coming with me. So that way I'm looking out this way, but my hand is helping guide that defensive lineman to the center. We are always taught that your hand is your third eye, because if your hand is out and you're looking for that extra stun or blitzer or whatever, you can help guide it and you'll feel that. The guy doesn't even have to be near you. You just feel that, after so many reps of play. So that's how it kind of works with that zone side. And being able to, move the feet and have your eyes and just rely on your kinesthetic awareness is so important as offensive line on the pass set, because it all comes back to that stance. So if it's a 4-point, either he's bull rushing you or he's going to shoot diagonally across the gap and try to screw you up. 3-point and a 2-point, it's kind of a mixed bag. 2-point is usually meaning like I know this guy's an edge rusher, so he's already going to try to set himself up at a really flat angle, and he's going to try to dip his shoulder and then rip around me on the outside. Or he could be doing that and using pace of play, like, oh, I've gone up against this guy, it's the 4th third down, and each and every time I've done that, he's been in a 2-point stance and he's taken an outside path. So what can happen sometimes is some offensive linemen can rely on a habit, or I don't want to say get lazy, but it's kind of the same thing. You set outside thinking he's rushing there, and then he stunts and comes inside, and then you're screwed. It's all like watching defensive linemen film, and tendencies and scouting reports are huge, but then it's also going back to what I said earlier, the pace of play. How are these guys really treating every single down? Am I getting looks that are consistent? Are they changing things? Am I getting bluffs from a corner or an overhang? And mixing all of that as well as communication really comes down to it as well. So that's how those stances I would kind of attack. And your rules and your pass blocking concept, for the most part, will make you right.
It's awesome to hear that when it comes to like technique, and I didn't know that when it came to, so you were talking about more of a split zone protection or a slide protection where you slide most of the time it's towards the strength, like let's say there's an overload front. You have a 4-man front. There's 2 defensive tackles off to the left of the center and the edge rusher, and then you have some odd, like person, basically one-on-one on the outside. I had no clue, and it was like that's why I wanted to ask you questions, because I had no clue when it came to like pass protection that if that person was running across the form, not running straight to you, but kind of going to the next gap over, that you still maintain where you're because it's a zone blocking scheme. You still maintain where you're at, but you are helping pass that guy off to the center, and then you didn't really have to worry about the guy because you knew that the center had your back. And that is obviously where you're gonna like whichever way they're sliding, the center's coming over to help. I have seen time and time again where with the offensive line and the Cardinals, when they pass off like people in pass protection, I see I believe it would be like a 5 technique that would be on the outside shoulder of a guard going,
You mean tackle?
yeah, tackle. There you go. So it would be the tackle that's passing off to the guard, or the guard passing off to the center. They run across, like if it's like a stunt move or whatnot, they're still maintaining their posture, trying to take whatever's coming their direction, but handing off or passing off that defender and whatnot, and then making sure that they know that they're covered in that situation. So it's really interesting. I've seen this time and time again on film, but I always thought about it as in like, so how do they sort that out? And that's another question I was going to have for you. So when it comes to like pass protection, the communication goes all across the offensive line. Of course, you're going to wait for the quarterback and, the guard. And that's a question I was going to have. I'll ask you that question first. What is the guard doing when he comes to communicating with the quarterback? So you see him turn, and then he gets in a set, hits, like taps the center, and then they hike the ball. What is that? What is going on there?
So from when I played, I never had the luxury of having to be, the guy to look back at the quarterback and basically be, the cadence guy, throwing out the arm or tapping or whatever. But it's used in the NFL because it does get loud, and especially with how stadiums are designed and acoustics and everything. Basically how it's picked up is, of course, each team blocks it differently. But if let's go back to like that zone side or that I had talked about earlier. So if the strength is to the left and I'm the left guard, okay, that means I know that I have inside help. Okay, so like looking at this right here, this is a great example. So this is actually flipped to what we talked about. So on the right hand side, you have your R call, so it could be Randy or Ricky, whatever. That means McBride's probably on a route here, and then you got I don't even know who 75 is. Is that Cologne? I don't know. This is the last game of the season, isn't it?
To be honest with you, I just pulled it up, and it's random. So this is the first thing that came up when it came to like my film when I pulled it back up. So this is the last game of the season. Obviously, they're in like an I formation. You have a Tip Ryman. I believe that's the strength of the formation, because you have your 2 tight end set to the right. I forgot what alignment this is, but you have an attached alignment.
You would call it, I don't know. I learned it as calling it a mouse. Basically, when the tight end lines up between guard, tackle, or even another tight end like that.
Okay, I see. And you have your attached tight end being Trey McBride to the right side. I believe this is Kelvin Beachum.
Yeah,
so
that's
Kelvin Beachum is in that left tackle. I wonder what happened there. I mean, Jesus, this game just happened, and I'm looking at Kelvin Beachum at left tackle. What happened to Paris that game? Did he get injured?
He got put on IR before that game. I think he got hurt in the Rams game or something. It all went to shit so fast. Part of my French. But looking at this play, I'm assuming this is a pass play. So if I'm the center here, and I'm immediately calling our zone side to the right, which is to the left of the viewing screen here. So Frohold's got the inside protection. It's actually a run, or actually play action. So that's quite different. But basically, if you go back to the front, or to before the ball snapped.
Let me go ahead and go back to that.
You're good.
So this is obviously that's the end zone right there. There we go.
Right here. So let's just say we're calling a basic smash concept out of this. I'm calling strength to the right, Ricky, whatever. Inside help is, to the guards, to the right guard's left, and to the right tackle's left in the inside gap. I'm assuming McBride is out on the route. So depending on if Tip is staying in here to help block, then the right tackle is going to know he also has some extra help, because either what can happen here is normally a tight end could chip a D line, but that is wider than a 9. You could basically call that an 11 tech with how far he is. So Paris is going, or whoever the right tackle is here at week 18.
I think it's Christian Jones.
He would have to set out at such a flat angle to over to protect that Kyler Murray's not blind side. Or actually, this is so flipped. I guess it would be his blind side from there. No, it's the left side. Who am I kidding?
I think I should let me just pull it up from this angle. That way it could be better. So
there we go.
Pull it up from the opposite.
So yeah, I mean, you got Jones blocking out for 95, and then 74, the right guard. That's where the wild card comes in, because you don't know, is Warner going to come down on the blitz? Is 33? And so obviously our right side is our man and zone side. That's where it's called. Now we look over to the left side of the line. You got Beecham on the left, and then 62. Once again,
not sure.
So many different.
I know we're gonna whiff on names. It's gonna happen. Yeah. That's understandable because I do that all the time.
This is where it gets really interesting, because on the back side here, on the non-string side call, this is man blocking scheme here. So 62, he's got that, we would call that a 2-eye technique, because he's not so much a 1, but he's lined up on the guard. So 62's got the 2-eye on the left side there, and Beecham's got that rusher 94, 96. What can happen is defenses here, they can definitely love the stunt. 10 can crash inside after 62 takes his man, and then all of a sudden we have someone to pick up. Now, what can happen is when the offensive line calls that strength call to the right, it also dictates where the back is going in pass protection. So if McBride and Tip Ryman are going out on routes here, that means Michael Carter is picking up the last guy to come through. So I can't say for most, but how I learned it was the back will go opposite of the strength call, and then he's picking up that excess guy. But it all depends on how, and how they move. Is it D tackle going out and then ends crashing in with the linebacker coming down in the A gap, and then insert, X amount of possibilities of different ways of doing it. So that's why in pass blocking, you have to move with urgency, but you also can't move too far, because if you do, you just left your gap open and it's a sack.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. And of course, because Kyler Murray has to turn his back over to the defense, it's way more important to make sure that you not only have your protection going, but if he turns around and there's somebody in his face, this play's dead, and he doesn't have much time to react, to be able to know where he's going. So another thing that I also had a question about is so it's important to call it the mic. So what would you say is the mic in this formation? And I know that the mic can be not exactly that actual position, but it could be like a safety coming down in the box and whatnot, and it dictates where you slide your protection to. So from what I understand and from what I've read, the mic would possibly be Fred Warner, because you have half of the defense on this side, you have half of the defense on that side. But of course, I could be wrong. It could be just directly right in front of him, and they say, if they're doing a split, not a split, like if they're sliding protection, depending on where the mic is. What would you say is the mic in this call?
So if this play is a pass, from what I had, and I only got to my levels in collegiate football for, so I could be wrong here. And of course, once again, it goes back to, rules and schemes and everything. But like usually on pass plays, you're not calling a mic. A mic is usually called on a run play that you're leaving a guy unblocked. So you're talking like an RPO. So if you're running option to the right side, usually your EMAL end man on the line of scrimmage, which is 94, 91 over there on the right to McBride, he's probably going to be your read key. So that means 85 is going up. He's first guy in. So he's locked up on 53 there. And that means Jones would have the mic. I call the mic probably, Fred Warner there, 54. It's just, it can also get a little bit dicey because of the formation here, because you don't know if this is an option. Is Tip Ryman, is he also, responsible for backer, next guy up, most dangerous man? So if that is, you got McBride on 53 and then Ryman on 54, that means your mic's all the way back in the middle at 10, if it is a run play. So, the direction of the play, how are we going to get to the mic? So if it's an outside option, then the play is going to flow to the right. That means 75 has 10 as the mic. So Froholt, or center here, whoever it is calling out, hey, 10's the mic. And it's running to the right. Where Christian Jones is going to meet 10 is basically to the right shoulder of 53, because the play is going to be flowing that way if it's an option. Okay. And, of course, if it crashes or if Murray would take it. It can also work with pulling plays and traps and other stuff like that. So at least from my experience, you really only calling a mic when it comes down to a run play.
Oh, that's interesting. There's times where I see the center pointing. And so at first, when I was learning about offensive running schemes and pass protection schemes, I'd see the center pointing out. He would never point directly in front of him. He would obviously point off to another direction. I always thought to myself, why is he pointing out off direction? I thought the mic was directly in front of him, and that's how you measure things out. But then I came to learn that it's more of like hey, how many defenders do we have on this side? How many defenders do we have on that side? And where do we meet at the middle? Okay, so I forgot what other question. So in this play, let's actually let it play it out, because I'm interested in knowing what Tip Ryman, that was the question in my head. What's Tip Ryman doing in this certain play call? Because it is a play action. This is not. Oh yeah, he is rolling. Yeah, he's he's staying in protection.
Up back there. What happens here on the left is so Beecham here he's got a long way to go, but 62 doesn't help Kelvin Beecham here at all. It's supposed to be like a slide right, but you can see both of them are doing the Olay block and they're just letting him go. So what Beecham has to do is he has to get flat and his head has to be on the inside of that 92 and slam down. So basically 62 isn't doing a bad job. 62 is expecting Beecham to get here a lot earlier, because if you go back a little bit, and I want you to pause it right after the ball is snapped. So, okay. And go ahead and pause it when I say.
Of course, it takes forever.
Now, okay. Go back just like half a frame, just so when.
Let's see if I can.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
So
of course, it's gonna give me the big chunk. Let me just play it out, and I'll stop it half a frame before that, or at least I'll try.
Right there, boom. Okay, so you can see that they're trying to get the line to flow. They're trying to make it look like it's a counter. So Beecham's supposed to be crashing down. 62 is supposed to be going down as well. But because 62 gets locked up with both hands and Beecham isn't there, you can see that 74 or left guard or right guard, he's pulling out to make it look like it's a counter play action boot. It doesn't get the defense to bite. And because Beecham doesn't get there in time, and 62 is like, shit, I need to get to the right. He lets go of the guy. And that's why that 2I or that D tackle splits the double team, a very weak one, and ends up putting the pressure on Kyler, which results in an incomplete pass.
Yep, he's
Yes.
getting there. And he also, I mean, he doesn't just touch him. He gets to him and whatnot. You obviously don't want to see that as your offensive line. They pride themselves on making sure that your quarterback is untouched. He needs a little bit more time to set his feet on that one. See, I wouldn't have seen it from that perspective. To be honest with you, the way I would have seen it is like that's just an incomplete pass. But he needs that time to be able to set his feet, and he's kind of
Right.
rushing to throw mostly because this guy's barreling down. So but thanks to you being able to break that down, now I understand that like there's some instances where maybe the quarterback got the ball out, but the quarterback feels the heat. He knows he has to let go. He knows he has to rush the throw. And I mean, this is an incompletion. This was obviously supposed to go for a touchdown, and it became an incompletion because of the fact that the pass protection just wasn't fully sound on that one and
Right.
whatnot. So yeah, like I mentioned before, like I would have seen this play and said, "Oh man, that's an
And
incompletion. Kyler Murray needs to make that throw."
I just
That's
want to
a
say two
oh, go
more
ahead.
things. I just want to say two more things about this play.
Okay,
If I'm, as an offensive lineman, and of course I know Kevin Beachum was way more successful than I ever was, but that's a long way to go. And I'm not crediting that. But with this kind of play, as an offensive lineman, you can absolutely stonewall this dude because he's going to be flown away. You're going to be able to get in. You get the right steps, head on the inside, and you get that punch. You're going to send that dude flying. We always call it a wham. You're going to wham the hell out of him, which is not to be confused with the wham play for the
yeah, wham block.
upbacks. And so, but I think Beacham's stance really screws him here because you can tell right now his stance is super narrow compared to his left guards. Like everybody else is in a
Oh,
run blocking stance.
oh,
And
I see.
Beacham, you can tell that his fingers are barely in the dirt. So maybe that's just his traditional stance, but he's not ready for that run block based on his stance. The last thing I'll say is maybe Ryman was also wrong here because Carter is part of the fake, so he's going to be trying to protect to the other side, to the strength. Maybe Ryman's supposed to look back and catch in that leakage because if Ryman flows back to his left and picks up that blocker, because Ryman does do jack diddly on this play. Ryman floats left depending on the rules and stuff. You can run it. He picks up that blocker. Murray's got more time to make a pass for a sure touchdown to McBride. Because look at it, we got three guys blocking one dude.
That shouldn't be that. That's
Now,
schematically
granted,
speaking. That's just
a lot of them are backups in here, so we can't really like get too uppity because we still blew them out by like 23 some points, but that's just a messed up in rules.
yeah. I didn't like. Yeah, that's too many people that's so many bodies just for one individual itself. When you have two other defenders, you have 94 and you have 93, basically applying the pressure and going 2 for 2. So not sure if it's because of alignment or if it's confusion, but they kind of get a little bit of a win here. And of course, if it leads to an incompletion, that it leads over to a win because that's all they're trying to do as a defense. They're trying to get incompletions. They're trying to get some sort of play being made. And of course, the success of this play hinged on getting enough time for Kyler Murray to set his feet and throw it to where he needs to throw it to, but he had to rush the pass in this situation. And like I mentioned, everybody would know me. I am a Kyler critic. So to me, I would have seen that as a negative, but then going back to it and viewing it, seeing four blockers just for one individual, that something's not right here.
So
There's something wasn't right. And I wouldn't have seen that if you pointed it out.
look at how Murray, when he goes to fake the handoff, he carries it up and back to the other side. Carter went to the wrong side here. Watch on the handoff or the fake. So he goes, it's on his left, and boom, Carter should have gone on the other side. So Murray's like, yo, what the fuck?
He does do that. He turns like a full 180
so
degrees.
Either Murray is wrong on his pivot or it's Carter not going to the right side or correct side.
Yeah, he has it. He fakes it with his left. No, with his right hand. So I see what you're talking about. I've seen the way he fakes the handoffs. He kind of like flows his arm that direction and then he turns back to whichever side he's flowing to. So he fakes the handoff with his right hand. Carter's going to his right, and I just saw that. And I don't think he needed to help on that pass protection side because just like you mentioned, you have four individuals. he probably should have flowed to his left. Then I didn't catch that. See, that's why I also need to consult when it comes to like offensive schemes. I'm more of a defensive person and whatnot, but I'm looking at the offense. I'm trying to diagnose what play they're in, what's going on in this, whose fault is it if it doesn't have any type of success. Those are two things that you pointed out that I just didn't see in this play. And even though we're only diagnosing one play, I mean, we learned quite a bit when it comes to like rules and pass protection and whatnot. And I mean, it kind of it turned me to have a different type of evaluation, at least at that play in itself. Oh, and then right very next play, you see automatic pressure in this one. I'm gonna put it on the end zone angle, and you tell me what's going on with this one, because this is a blitz, and looks like nobody was able to pick up anything on this one, and Kyler Murray had to dump it off for an incompletion.
Yeah, when it comes to watching offensive line play, this view right here is called the tight, and the tight is everything, especially from either side for O or D line. So looking at this is a very interesting defensive front. So whoever the defensive coordinator for the Niners was or is, I can't remember. This is a front as an offensive lineman or a center. You're like, oh crap, I hate this, because you are basically in a man on man here with how spread out things are. Pause it right here.
Mm-hmm.
So you basically have, you got a questionable alignment there over 62. Is he a 2-eye? Is he a 1 tech? He's slanted, which, he's coming inside. And you got another guy who's basically a 4 technique, head up on the tackle. And then you got Warner, who's always a threat. And then I think Bosa's over there on the other side with an overhang out on both. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on 5 with maybe another blitzer coming. So at this point you'll see Bosa comes around on the inside. He stunts in.
He stunts.
And he screws it all up.
He basically gets a free run to the quarterback.
So he gets the hezzy on Jones, and then he loops inside because they must have called a zone to this, and he goes right over Froholt, which he overcommitted, and that's where the pressure happened.
Yeah, I saw that. So it looked like to me like they were trying to slide. No, he helps out. Actually, it works to perfection here. And even like Fred Warner was able to get penetration on that to the right side. And so from what I learned when it comes to like picking up blitzes, or at least calling out blitzes, if you have like a defensive back lined up against a wide receiver, he's not even trying to show disguise that he's going to blitz. He's just facing the quarterback here because they have the numbers advantage. But if you have a defensive back up on a wide receiver and you have another defensive back lined up directly behind him, that's a direct like blitz tell there. Usually I see wide receivers pointing that out or telling the quarterback like, beware for this guy, he's coming and whatnot. But that's, just playing it once again.
On Zay Jones, but this is also Zay Jones we're talking about. But here, this is where Kyler's got to read, and he has to be ready, and he's got to know where his hot or his escape option is, which, try to get it from a wide, that sideline view. Usually it's a tight end or it's a dump off in the flat, but so it looks like DJ Dallas is in the block. He's got to throw right now. Because who's that? Michael Wilson? Dortch?
I believe so. I think it's Greg Dortch.
He's got Dortch right there. And that's the one thing that has kind of frustrated me about Kyler Murray is that there is no bleep, like I gotta throw. Like, yes, he does avoid a sack, but if 5 more yards, this ball's not getting, to the line of scrimmage possibly, and it's an intentional grounding, and it's a terrible play. There needs to be more hot routes and more ways for Kyler Murray to be saved from this offensive line, which was average and overperformed at times this year. So that way he himself can live the fight another day.
I see. Yeah, that's true. I didn't really see much when it came to side adjustments, and that's something that I've also had questions about. If that's something that the quarterback, if he has that communication with this wide receiver and he tells us his wide receiver, like, hey, if they're coming, we're going to do a side adjust on this play, which means whatever the route that the wide receiver was running, he is cognizant of the fact that he has to go short, mostly because he knows that this quarterback has to get rid of the ball. So in this instance, whether that China route was actually supposed to be what he ran, that would be what you would say as a side adjustment. And Kyler Murray knows, hey, the heat's coming. I better get rid of this ball, soon. You don't want to let the pressure get to you and be in a position where you're obviously having to bail from the pocket and then get rid of it and have another lost play. Hey, our friend over there, Joe Camo, is
Hey, man.
saying, how's it going, Joe? Of course, he's all like, Marcus and AVP in the house, time to sit back and learn. So he knows that we're over here, like, not only just doing our film study, but we're trying to showcase what we know about, like, well, more when it comes to like offensive blocking and schemes and whatnot. But I mean, when we do like on this show, we try to show more of the film. We try to
Yeah.
showcase what's going on, and more so than just talking or speaking about it. So we're gonna be closing up, shop soon. I have one question for you. So this has to do with the off season. This off season, free agents. Who are the individuals that you say would want to keep, and what direction would you go for? Would you go free agency when it comes to like signing, or would you go in the draft? And when you draft, are you a draft and develop as a pipeline person, or are you just looking for straight out just talent? Because I believe you mentioned that you'd want to draft them sooner than later. I'm the pipeline type of person, but what are your thoughts about this upcoming season?
In terms of free agency, I've always been in the belief that, I know a lot of people be like, well, championship teams are made in the draft, but also you can also get a game changer piece in free agency. And there is no reason that the Arizona Cardinals, with all the money that they're sitting on, don't offer that to somebody who could be a game changer. Now, are we going to always get, the A++ free agents? No. I would say a victory for them is to just get like a solid B to B+ player, in free agency. You could go, if you're looking at offensive lineman, which is my first time really looking at the free agency class this year. There's Austin Corbett, who was a former offensive lineman for the Rams. Now he's in Carolina, but he'll be a free agent. There's also James Daniels from Pittsburgh, who's a guard, which I don't really know anything about. I go out and get a game changer, because you get a game changer, you get a veteran, you put him in a position group with a rookie or a young team, he has a chance to lead it. So I just like everybody, I want to see the Cardinals be super aggressive this year in free agency. I want to see big contracts going out and Monty not being afraid to spend. I'm hoping for an offense or defensive lineman within the first 2 picks. I'd also be satisfied with another cornerback as well, because as good as Garrett Williams was, which that was a very pleasant surprise, Max Melton was up and down, and I was originally not too high on him in the first place, especially after passing up who we passed up. But, he's okay. It's no Brandon Williams back there, or insert other hated Cardinals quarterback. So those 3 of where I'm looking. I would go with that. And then one thing I want to add, I know you were asking me about, where I think this offense is really going. As long as Drew Pessing is the offensive coordinator, the identity of this team isn't going to change. It's a little bit of an advanced metric, but I looked into the personnel usage that they had and their expected points added per play. So the Cardinals, despite us me to really think that their 12 and 13 personnel really dominated everything, they actually spent 50% of the time in 11 personnel, 1 running back, 1 tight end. Expected points added just basically tells you how many plays are positive enough that, are getting them a higher chance to add points. The personnel group that they use the most, 11 personnel, 50% of the time, their rush EPA was a 0.01 and a pass was a 0.04. basically half the time they were just running plays to do nothing, which is, kind of weird. Like, we did good. We had a 4-game win
Yeah.
streak. We were 6-4. Where they were the most successful was in their 12 personnel. So one running back, 2 tight ends. The rush EPA jumped up to 0.06, which was way higher in the league rankings, and their pass EPA went up to 0.16. That was their overall best, because 13 personnel, which was ran at 14.5%, had a negative rush EPA, but their highest pass EPA. So I guess it kind of muddled out. This offense is going to stay the same. And I want to see more spread out concepts. I want to see, 3, 4, go 5 wide at some point, but more creativity, a little more West Coast style. In the run game, I want to see, wider zone plays. So that way, when you start developing that James Conner ground game, he gets going and cooking. You go to show that handoff, and it's a play action boot. You got the defense biting on that, and there's Marv or whoever new wide receiver we draft or bring in, running open for a touchdown. A combination of that with, free agent wide receiver, free agent lineman, would be huge. So that way we can truly give Kyler Murray the best tools to succeed, and hopefully, block better than what we saw, so he can actually make that throw to McBride in the end zone when it counts. So that's my final take.
Yeah, that's a good stat that you brought up. That's one of the big analytic stats is EPA, and that pretty much tells you like what offenses and what success rate they operate at. So most of the time I hear that when I watch a Brett Coleman video, he always brings up EPA and stuff, and it's a very important stat that we pretty much ignore, because most of the time we're paying more attention to like offensive rankings and whatnot, or like,
Yeah.
hey, where the PFF put them at and whatnot. So that's very interesting, and the breakdown of like what personnel we're mostly more successful in and whatnot. There's people and naysayers that will say we don't like this 12 personnel, 13 personnel look. This whole tight end heavy scheme is actually what's like hampering us down when it comes to like the ability to pass and throw the ball downfield and be successful with the passing concepts that we have. But I've always thought that when it comes to Kyler Murray, we have to give him a good support system in the run game. So if
Yeah.
we're tossing, well, I mean, people are starting to turn around with the whole like screen game. That's what I find so weird. A lot of
Like
people want more
reverting back
screens
to
now.
I want bubble screens.
That's it's insane. I've seen that a
Will never
couple of
be
times.
me.
I've oh, you want more bubble screens? I was thinking to myself, like, I thought people didn't miss Cliff, and now because Cliff is gone, we got the polar opposite, which is Drew Petzing. Now it's like, hey man, can we get a bubble screen out there? Can we get some more screens? Is that more so because you want Marvin Harrison Jr. to get more touches, or is it just because that like that
I don't
aspect of the
see
game is
Marv
being
as
missed?
a yacker. I don't see Marv as a yacker in that regard. You need like a true slot receiver. Like if Greg Dortch is going to run that stuff, fine. But maybe like 1, 2, 3 max a game to Marv, sure. But like if he's going to start having the DeAndre Hopkins Kingsbury route tree, I'm going to start drinking.
It's crazy, yeah. It. I mean, that route tree for that one game in specific, it was just crazy. But that's how they operated, and weirdly enough, they did throw screens to not just DeAndre Hopkins, but Larry Fitzgerald, who are not the typecast for like getting the screen and just going. And whatever success they had with that, they sometimes had success. Most of the time, it was just kind of weird to see somebody like that just get the ball behind the line of scrimmage and try to make a move to make somebody miss. DeAndre Hopkins was way more successful with that, and there's some highlights of him being able to do it. What about jet sweeps? There's some people that are putting highlights of Marvin getting that jet sweep, or I saw one in particular with CeeDee Lamb taking it for like 40 or 50 yards. Would you like to see more of those?
You got to have people who can block. And who are the wide receivers on this team that are not Tip Reiman or, well, not technically, but Tip or McBride? You take those 2 guys out. Who's going to block? Michael Wilson? Okay. You think Greg Dortch is going to be blocking a linebacker? How are you going to get people out there to block? I mean, you're going to need, Zay Jones and who was the Zach Pascal, were as useless as an empty bag of chips on the offense this year. So
Yeah.
You're going to need somebody who can block and somebody who likes to do it. Just a
That's
bigger
right.
bodied wide receiver who likes to block, which, you don't find guys who like to block that much nowadays. I mean, the last one I can really think of was, I don't know, maybe Heinz
Jennings.
Ward.
Jennings from the San Francisco 49ers who got
Oh,
SMB.
yeah, that's right.
That guy liked to block, but of course it wasn't for our team. And you're right about that. There's wide receivers that don't like to get dirty. They do not like to get out there and block, and
Well,
that's kind of more of a hassle.
the other thing is they don't understand how to take a blocking angle. Like if the play is flown to the left, how do I take my angle out that way? Like obviously running a route against somebody who's moving with you and he's going to go with you is different than somebody who's trying to run to a spot and go behind you. So it all comes down to that. But jet sweeps, sure, I guess, but I just want to see more creative passing concepts, from the route, from the blocking schemes, and you continue to develop the ground game because it was one of the best in the league, especially during that win streak. I mean, there's no telling. And then you have a ground game that takes pressure off of Murray, which for him would be a godsend. Then he's more comfortable in the pocket, and he doesn't hopefully make mind-numbing mistakes like the whole back half of the season was this year because O-line started to get bad, counter started to break down, and all floodgates broke.
Yeah, absolutely. That I would say that those three changes, and plus the pressure of also needing to win that game so that we can finally get to the point of hopefully getting to the playoffs on year 2 of this rebuild. I think a lot of that was kind of also the pressure that added on to it. Unfortunately, we have to go up against Leonard Williams, and he became an all-pro type of player for that one game, just dominating our entire offensive line like no other. And that was somebody that I always kept my eye on. I was thinking to myself, this Cardinals team has been lacking a playmaking defensive tackles, and we haven't had one since Calais Campbell or Darnell Dockett back in like the old not Steve Keim days, but the late
Ken Wisenhunt.
When Ken his I forgot who the general manager was. Rod Graves. He that guy was a stud when it came to drafting. He drafted that defense. I mentioned that yesterday and the podcast that he basically built that defense that just was filled with studs, and he got him from the second to the third to the fourth round. It didn't matter. They were just staples, and now we can't draft a defensive tackle to save our lives in this instance. And when we do, there's some kind of issues going on with him, and we don't have enough time for him. Hopefully next year we'll see more of our stud or hopefully our stud defensive tackle or defensive end. I like to call him a defensive end and whatnot. So this year I think that should be a focus in our defense, and at the very least we should at least address the edge rusher position with somebody that comes in. Oh, you know what? One more question. Who would you like for them to sign at edge rusher? Because we have names out there, obviously, that we're connected.
Oh, man.
Or prayed for. Because you heard Myles Garrett is a name that we keep coming up. Max Crosby. We have hopefully reuniting with Son Reddick. Although he's kind of up there in age and whatnot, I would love to see him back at a Cardinals uniform. There was one more name that was.
I would like to see somebody. If you're going to go big, I prefer Garrett. But I would, I know Johnny Venables or somebody was pounding the table for Josh Sweat, but I also think
Josh Sweat. There you go.
Chase Young could be revived in Nick Rouse's defense.
That's right. He although the sexy number, which is sacks, isn't up there with Chase Young, he low key is somebody that does get a lot of pressure, and I mean he's still a specimen himself. It just sucks that his career went to the position that it did. Well, all right, AVB, I'm gonna ask you one last question. I know I said that last time. Where can we find you, and where can we find you and give your shout out for any handle that you have?
Yeah, so my Twitter handle is right here at AVB Sports. And then my YouTube channel is my full name, Aaron Van Buren, 2 A's, 2 R's. And I'm going to work on the consistency of that going a little forward. and just trying to stay active as much as I can. So I really appreciate the time, Marcos.
Hey, anytime. And I would like to invite you in the future as well. Love this conversation. Love breaking down the X's and O's. And so, I mean, we're in the post. I believe there's a game going on right now with the Lions, or I'm not sure who's playing right now, but we don't pay attention too much to what's going on with that because of the fact that we had Rams playing in our own damn building in a playoff game. We just want to see the Cardinals. We want to talk about this next year where the Cardinals are actually in the playoffs and not like starting, like the off season and whatnot. But to everybody, have a great and wonderful night. Be safe out there. It is a Saturday night. If you're here in Phoenix or if you're anywhere in the country, just please be careful out there. You guys have a good night and go Cardinals.